Well, I'm very pleased to have Dr. James Norrie, who is the dean of our School of Business, Cybersecurity. Also, journalism's in there a little bit of construction management.
Wow,
he is a dean. He is a dean for all people.
So he can grade us here on our journalism.
Absolutely.
Maybe make some improvements to the studio if he needs to.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, good. And he's a doctor. We have another doctor, Mark Welber, as well. So
yes, and Mark is also a graduate of Utica College, along with myself. So we have a little bit of interest here.
Jill, you and I, we're not.
I guess I'm just,
we're not doctors.
No. You two are just drinkers.
We'll be patients.
I have my seals. Does that count?
Of what?
My National Weather Association.
That counts. It's way better accreditation.
And I'm verified on Twitter, so it's okay.
There you go. I think that's better than anything I've done here.
It's an honest job.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
there you go.
Yeah, grab the mic, Doctor. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what goes on at UC, your world, some of the focus. What are you seeing? What are some of the hot topics around the campus?
My world is very much complicated by the kinds of things you guys are just talking about. You can imagine in cybersecurity, we watch the country light up.
Yep.
Those kinds of things happen. So I'm sure we'll be watching for the religious thematic nuts coming out on the cybersecurity side. So it'll be fascinating. The lab will be busy this morning, I'm sure.
Well, this actually makes me think.
The Apple case. Talk about the Apple
Sure, we
case.
can talk about the Apple case.
Explain that to us from a technical standpoint. You understand what's going on.
I'm going to stop you, Mark. I do want to get into that, but
right,
I think leading into this conversation, we just talked about politics. I had a story about a week and a half ago in regards to the New Hampshire primary and what went on there. And the story was data being tracked by pretty much all the individuals that were in the area. They created this tracking data, and it determined multiple different things, where they were going, the type of things maybe they would like to eat, where their kids were at the time. How close is this to everyday life, or is it here already?
It's already here. So let's be 100% clear. The debate between individual liberty and collective security is one that this nation is only beginning really to talk about in a kind of meaningful way. Most of us have no idea how much data is collected about us, where it is, how it is. There really is a sense that we are protected somehow. We live in this weird bubble where we think we still have privacy.
We like to feel that way.
We don't. We live in a post-private world. That's really clear. And it's clear that our government is in the position of having to debate and worry about collective security and the way that we are going to protect the nation on the one hand while respecting the Constitution and the things that we all hold near and dear. So in the field, we are a little worried about some of this because it intrudes. We talk about it when it hits. The Apple case is a good example.
Sure, yeah.
So there's all kinds of things we could talk about. But at its core, there's a really fundamental question for all of us, and that is, to what extent should what we do be tracked and retained by whether it's government, whether it's political parties, whether it's commercial radio station. I'm going to tell you, everybody who looks at web traffic will tell you that there is so much I could sort of coalesce around you. You'd be so surprised.
Well, we see that, how the way ads are targeted for specifics on our social media. You're looking through your Facebook or whatever, and you're like, how do they know that I'm looking for a new car?
Right. And so much of what we teach now, people use the umbrella term cyber in a really interesting way. It really is just computer science of old updated. But when you add stuff like public relations to cyber, when you add politics and government to cyber, now you're into some really interesting territory because technology is so pervasive. There probably isn't a field we teach at Utica College that doesn't have some element of cyber to it because you have to. Look at the medical field, medical records, and the fact that the transit of medical information electronically between doctors, hospitals, practitioners, nurses. You look at that. What kind of risk does that bring? How many of us would be impressed if our medical records were easily available? Well, the answer is they already are. I can buy them online from crime gangs who rip them out of insurance companies, frauds. If I want to find out about your retail activity, I can get your credit card data. I can buy credit cards for about 70 cents a number, online. So it's a really different world we're dealing with, and one of the things I'm really proud of the little college that could, Utica College has done a great job of really trying to embrace these new disciplines, add some really good rounding. So everybody who graduates from the college, we were just talking about this, Bob downstairs, that everybody who graduates from the college graduates with a balance of those professional skills that are going to get them that job, but with a real understanding of their place in the world. Being a citizen today in a country like this is complicated.
It's kind of important to know where maybe you stand or where you fit in.
Where you're going to stand.
Right.
We haven't even had most of the conversations we're going to need to have, and I don't know when you want to get to it, but the Apple case is fascinating.
Talk about it from a technical standpoint, because
we're still trying to break into Jill's phone. We want to find out all the information.
Well, we can. It's already broken.
We can fix that. So we are really lucky. So our program, amongst other things at Utica College, we have a New York State certified crime lab that works right on campus, and the students get a chance to work through in rotations. And so one of the things we look at often is what's known in our terms as physical access to devices. So you have a computer, you have a phone, you have whatever. And one of the things we want to do in the lab is that if that phone has been seized properly, through warrant or through an investigation, that device is in the possession of law enforcement. Law enforcement has the right then to go ahead and extract whatever information it may want in relationship to that investigation.
Physically, tangibly holding the device.
Okay, correct. So the first thing we have to establish is that somebody has probable cause. So you can't just, I couldn't just take Jill's phone. I mean, it's as wonderful as it would be to find out what's on that phone. I can only imagine having daughters. Anyway, so the point is, I couldn't just take that phone, and I wouldn't have the legal authority to look inside it and peek into what's behind door number one. However, let's assume you have probable cause. So I think in this case we've established there is no doubt the FBI has probable cause. I think we would all agree legally we've established it. And in fact, they even have, beyond probable cause, they have public cause, because there is probably not an American in this room or in this nation that would not say that that guy's phone deserves to be jacked and we need to know what's inside.
I agree. Everybody here?
Everybody agree?
All right.
So you have that premise as a public and as a legal entitlement. Now, the really complicated part of this is that in our lab, if it was a phone that sort of predated the current series, we could physically actually go into the phone, extract the memory and the operating system, put it into another device, we could crack the phone, it'd be like that.
Wow.
What Apple has, and that's, people don't know that, but we do that all the time. So I see Jill's fingers are, if you saw her here in the studio, she's busy erasing photos, Mom.
She's gripping her phone tightly.
Right.
So, let me put mine in my pocket.
So that's actually not a problem, because older series phones did not have a couple of things that are features of both the 5 and the new 6 series phones. Now some interesting stuff has happened. So, and I don't want to get too technical on a radio show, but I will say this. There's a difference between security that's attached to the device physically and security which is involved in the software. So if you have software-based security features, theoretically, if they've been created by coding them into software, they can be decoded similarly by attaching a new piece of software. So here's the difference. If you have, so it's like breaking into a website versus a house. If I want to break into a house, I have to physically break through a window, a door. I have to penetrate the exterior of the building envelope, okay? And if I'm talking about a digital creation, theoretically, I never have to actually do the physical intrusion into the device.
You don't have to be in front of it? You don't have to be near it?
I might not even have to have it. So theoretically, we know this from the number of celebrity hacks, as an example, in the cloud. If somebody has, for instance, uploaded their phone into a cloud somewhere, don't even get me started on the cloud.
Oh, I don't participate.
All right. So then in the cloud, we can theoretically get at it digitally and through software. So here is the real problem. And I have really mixed feelings about saying what I'm about to say. I'm actually going to suggest that Apple's position is somewhat solid on the one hand, but creates a huge legal problem on the other. So the solid part of this is, really, why should we expect Apple and their engineers to create something, consider it like a key in a lock? Why should we be willing to force Apple to create a key in a lock that protects all of our phones simply because you have one isolated example of this particular phone that law enforcement wants to
Which they had really nothing to do with, just the fact that this individual
happened to be a phone consumer.
Consumer.
So you have Apple being instructed legally to put its engineering team to work undoing the very thing which many people believe is fundamentally important to the device itself, which is it's a secure device. Okay. And there is a lot of evidence to suggest that once that key has been created, it will be eventually taken by people who are not Apple. Okay, so now what happens? So we were talking this morning, I heard one of your callers, we were drinking coffee waiting to come into the studio. There's one of your callers suggesting that we had domestic jihadists and, what are we? And okay, well, so why don't we just hand the keys to the kingdom to the jihadists? So why don't we go ahead, make Apple create that code and then just hand it to them and say, now you can hack anybody's phone who's an Apple user. Is that appropriate? So on the one hand, I agree that Apple has a very substantial corporate issue around whether or not this government has the right to force it to do something that it has no commercial interest in doing. So that's really interesting. They're not saying help us hack the Apple system, but that's the net effect of that is the same. They're really restricting it to the one phone and saying, just help us hack this horrible guy's phone.
Right.
So we all react going, oh, you should do the phone, without realizing if you do that, like Jill, You're a nanosecond away from all those photos.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
all those
that
cloud photos.
What you're saying is that if Apple right now the key does not exist to use stay with your metaphor.
Correct.
The key does not exist, so you cannot decode or
and why it doesn't exist. It's important to understand why it doesn't exist. The phone software interacts in such a way that if anybody attempts, so the method that they're talking about using is called a brute force attack. A brute force attack would just keep hitting the phone, okay, with as many repetitive 4-digit combinations till the phone cracks. And quite frankly, there are not a ton of 4-digit codes. Four-digit codes are nothing in our world.
10 times 10.
Well, that's why I had
10 to the power of 4 times 10 to the power of 3 times 10 to the power of 2.
I don't have the 4-digit code.
Get it. The point is, there's only thousands of them eventually that you can win as soon as you get the first digit, and so it goes. Okay, so it's really not hard to hack. So what Apple did, because most of us don't want to remember a lot of numbers, so whatever your 4 numbers are, you know. But if it was okay,
I changed it.
All right, but if it was 4, if it's 6, if it's 8, if it's 10, which would make a brute force attack much harder, it's more complicated for users. So what Apple did, which is ingenious, is they created a scenario where you can't put more than 10 in without the phone wiping itself. Right. Okay. Oh. So that's a feature of security built into the software. So the problem that the FBI has is they can't crack by using their normal method. If you can't get underneath the software layer, you can't get to the information underneath that's contained in the phone. So what they want Apple to do is to basically override that security feature with a piece of code that would suppress it. And the problem with that is once they do that,
which would then allow them to
hackers are like, thank
with
you.
as many PIN numbers as they can until they finally hit.
Almost going back to your house analogy, where I install a new lock, and for some reason someone says, "Go ahead and make 50 other keys and spread them out wherever you want, and see if someone can get in your house."
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. Here's what we'll do, Jay. We'll sell one to the FBI. You wouldn't object to that, right?
Sure,
the FBI can have one.
Yeah, they're great.
But your ex-girlfriend's going to get the other, and your buddy in college is going to get the other. And guess what? You know what? You're not so happy.
Yeah, and maybe my ex-girlfriend will make another copy and give it to her current boyfriend.
It could be.
Oh, jeez. So look where we're going now, Joe.
Now we're kind of going into some weird territory. But the point is.
But right now, Apple does not have the ability to decode.
Correct.
Right? They would have to develop this.
Right.
Well, you're not sure they can do it. They think they can, but they're not even sure they can do it. Correct? Is that right?
At law, we have an interesting issue here. And the issue is the difference between somebody's legal right to assert something. So, for instance, the FBI clearly has the legal right to assert ownership of the phone in the investigation and any of the information. But here's the important part, that it can get to. So what it is attempting to do legally is quite distinct. It is attempting to compel a private company to use its time and resources to invest in building them a tool that doesn't exist, that has no commercial purpose, that Apple would never build this key, ever, in its entire corporate existence, if it was not instructed to by the FBI.
They went the other way.
They would build tools that would make it more impossible, more difficult.
And that really is
that's the
legal precedent.
That is the legal problem.
Up until now, no private enterprise
has ever been forced to do
has been forced to do anything such as it. You give the device.
Right.
They have a warrant. They can seize the phone. They've got the phone.
Right.
But the private company does not have to assist you in harvesting the data.
Well,
you
they
could
don't
harvest the data up until these new phones came in with this brute force wall that says after 10 tries the data is wiped.
It's a software firewall, and I'll tell you what's really intriguing. In our lab, we would have had no problem cracking old generation phones. We do it all the time. We do it in law enforcement hundreds of times a year, right in our lab. Teach students how to do it. It's easy. When you get to the point where the software and the hardware and the firmware interact in such a way that you are essentially making the phone so that it cannot be cracked by law enforcement. Okay,
or by anyone.
By anyone. Right. That's the important. You're right, Mark. That's a good distinction. It's not just law enforcement. It's by anyone. So here's where we run into trouble. The debate between individual liberty and freedom and collective security is impacted by the law enforcement agencies in this country, the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, all saying that unless the major technology companies, the bulk of which are American, unless they are prepared to build backdoors into those systems, we have hit the point where not just law enforcement, but nobody can crack these systems without the help of the technology companies embedding something into the software that'll let people around. Now, we will find methods probably over time, but every time, Apple mines billions of dollars of profit a quarter, okay? They've got some of the brightest minds in the world working for them, far brighter than might work, for instance, for our dear colleagues at the FBI or the NSA. And so what you have is thousands of engineers who are attempting to defeat that access. And you have a handful of government engineers and computer scientists working as civilians for law enforcement attempting to keep up and go, Now what do we do?
See,
There's the problem.
You
So
make a good
there's
point.
the underlying
you said
message.
The old phones, your lab could hack those like this. You snap your finger.
Yep.
If you can do it that quickly, that means lots of other people can do it as well.
That's the point. We live.
So
I will assert
there are all
here-
kinds of people who can do these
Sure.
things. You said we won't do it unless we know that the government has seized this with some type of authority. If there's a warrant,
But we have to operate under the premise of law, right?
However, other people are not restricted by that. So some person who's just interested in harvesting data could pick up an older phone, do the same thing you do, and harvest the data.
Sure.
Because if you can do it, other people can do it. If Apple, right now, nobody knows how to get the information on that phone. And there's not even a method of doing it. But if Apple creates that method, which you call the back door,
Yep.
then other people are going to figure out how to get into everyone's phone. And so the security measures that Apple is selling to their customers are not really going to be secure.
So
isn't that the issue?
That is the issue. In full circle. So, Bob, I'll say to you, you're running a Republican campaign, and you're a Democrat, or you're a Democrat and you want to run a campaign against a Republican. You'd sure want some of those keys.
Well, it's like
absolutely.
I'm still laughing about the Jeb Bush thing.
Right.
Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's genius.
With the
website.
Yeah,
Oh my
we were talking about it the other day. Yeah.
So we live, here's a provocative statement. We live in a post-private world. And I think that has all kinds of implications for our society, for our government, for our every element of our life. And
The other thing that Apple's doing, I think, is they're protecting other companies.
Sure. And,
Yeah.
and now Google's jumped
I
on
mean, once Apple is forced to do it, now you've got every other technology company. When something comes down the road, you're setting precedent. If
That's the
they
whole,
lose this case,
and the other aspect
it's
of that
problematic.
is this.
So-
In this particular case, because of the horrific action of the people whose phone is being, whose data they want to get, people tend to sympathize more than they might in another case. But once you open that door and say, okay, you can do it in this case, then who's to say we can't do it because these people are engaged in internet activities with young children, and now somebody's engaged in drug activity, which involves a lot of money.
Right.
Well, then we should break it for that. Once you open that door to break that barrier, then sets a precedent that now the door can be broken. It's just a matter of can you justify it, and that's at the crux of this situation.
Right. What you just hit on, which absolutely I think is the core of the issue. If the majority of people who were engaged in rhetoric around, of course you should crack that phone, so long as they can make the statement that of course you should have access to my data. So as long as they can make that corollary statement, I'm good. They can take whatever position they like. So if you're asserting that and you're listening to this show and you say Apple should crack that phone, I just want to be clear, the instant you say Apple should crack that phone, it's
My
Apple,
phone too.
yeah, my phone too. We're all cracked. We're all done.
I'll tell you, in the criminal sphere, to give you an analogy, the police cannot conduct a search of someone's home without a search warrant. If they search the home and they find all kinds of things, they can't use it. There's a rule in the law that says a search is not made valid
Probable
by
cause.
what is seized. So you can't say, well, we went in there, but look at the stuff we found, therefore we should be able to use it. No. You determine probable cause, with or without a warrant, before you go in. If you go in illegally, it makes no difference what you get. And they'll say, sorry, doesn't matter what you get because the fruits of the search do not justify the search.
I'll never get to look around Jill's apartment at that rate.
Well, I can help you with that. You ready?
No.
You ready, Jay? Yeah, I can help you with this because there's one exception. And we won't do it on the show this morning. We'll have to come back and do it, so tempt you back.
Well, we want you back.
Well, thank you.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
But we'll tell you there's one exception, which is we're going to tie. I don't know whether you know this, but there's a number of jihadist weather people. Did you know this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So they're very strange people. So
Yes.
what we're going to do is I'm going to bring a little bit of data, falsely constructed, okay, that I'm going to get from Mark, and it's going to look like you and Mark have a thing going around jihadist weather forecast. Okay, you're trying to do bad things. Okay, so Jay's going to report that to the NSA. The NSA is going to take it to a court called FISC. There are no other lawyers other than government lawyers present. They're going to convince a justice appointed by the government, who is in completely secret proceedings going to issue a non-probable cause warrant called ex parte to go into Jill's apartment and seize your phone.
I knew it.
So Jay,
She's involved.
Jay, I'm your boy.
All right, good. Doctor, I love it. That means you're coming back. That's an open invitation right there. Bob Cardillo, I appreciate it. I appreciate you bringing in a guest. I know you'll be tuned in this weekend to what's going on in
Saturday
South
in
Carolina.
South Carolina.
Well, I'll contact you you over the weekend.
In Nevada.
I'm sure we'll be talking next week. So thanks again, gentlemen. Love to have you back, as I mentioned. Great conversation. We're going to take a quick break as we try to crack Jill's phone here during the
news. Cracked,
during the news
I mean.
break. Here you go, Doctor. I'll give you Jill's phone so you can work on that during the break. It's Samantha's News coming up. It's 9:31 on the Talk of the Town, 100.7 FM, WUTQ.
It's actually